Hey everyone, we're glad you're here. Welcome to our latest installment of Cyber Threat Workshops from RiskIQ. I'm Josh Mayfield, and joining me is Benjamin Powell. I will say that we have several hundred people that are signed up for today's workshop, and they're going to be piling in. And as we come into the virtual room here on the Zoom webinar, we're just going to give it a couple more minutes. We do have a few housekeeping things we're going to get through, which will get you into the interface and actually into the lab environment. That way you can start getting through. Today, we are going to be hunting down a lot of adversary threat infrastructure. So just, we're going to say this later again, but just be cautious. We're glad you're here, but we're just going to give it another minute or so for everyone to pile in and, correct their login information as they were getting in and all of that. We spend most of our day tracking down threats and cyber criminals, and so sometimes you get late to a lab like this. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes and we'll get started. And we're very glad you're here.
We have a lot of stuff. This is going to be more things than we can probably get through unless we manage our time appropriately. Each one of these exercises we're doing, we could do a whole workshop on.
Probably could. Yeah. Especially Jupyter. Yeah. Everybody loves Jupyter too. That's the thing I'm worried about. So many of the participants every week, week in and week out, really like getting into Jupyter notebooks. Yeah. And so I'm curious if we're going to get through that portion, because so many people have such interesting real world examples and how they've used it, and then trying to apply some of the things that we're doing in that domain. Yeah.
What we're going to do today with the Jupyter is there was a JSON file that was published that had some indicators in it. So we'll take that JSON file and absorb it into Jupyter and run some queries against it, so we can find out what's common with the indicators. So like if you ever did an investigation and say, how do these people get compromised? What was the commonality across all these indicators? This is a quick way to do that. So it'll be really cool to look at it that way.
Yeah. And so we do want to encourage you to drop your questions there. It looks like we already have one, which was somebody asking if this is going to be recorded. Yes, indeed. We gotta, record these things for posterity. Plus, there's plenty of people that need this information so they can shield themselves against adversary infrastructure that they get entangled with in their digital footprint. So yeah, we record all of these, and we'll be sharing out the slides that we shared today. The lab exercise, we have a threat resources that you'll be able to go to, as well as the recording of the day too.
And so, all of the pivots that we're going to do, and all of the searches we'll do, all the URLs I've captured, and those will be inside of the slides, so you can actually go through and do these at a slower pace to go and expand these investigations.
That's right. Now, we have a group of people that have started coming in. So Benjamin, why don't you say that we just go ahead and advance things? Again, as I mentioned earlier, today's topic is about adversary threat infrastructure. And so Benjamin, let's get started.
So I'm Benjamin Powell, I'm the Director of Technical Marketing here at RiskIQ. Managed teams for many years, and then went over to a few startups, and been here at RiskIQ almost 5 years. Fun fact is I enjoy spearfishing, and I just caught this halibut Saturday. So when I tell that to people in our industry, they no longer take my emails. So I actually go out and swim and catch fish in the ocean, and I'm a spearfisherman. So I'll turn it over to you, Josh.
Hello, I don't have nearly as interesting a background, and I don't live anywhere near an ocean. I'm Josh Mayfield. I'm in Austin, Texas, which is in Texas, by the way. We're all really proud of that fact. Many people that are from Texas, and so I work with Benjamin very closely, and my background's a little bit different. Where Benjamin has years of being a practitioner, mine's in sort of the research side, and in particular, looking at the economics of cybercrime and looking at threat actor profiles in the sense of what's driving their psychology, their motivations, their incentives. And that led me into some cryptocurrency study and some of the things I did when I was in school. But yeah, I know what it's like to put on the parka and get into the data center. I know what it's like to be in the dark, dim room and actually at the machine, spotting and locating them, but from a different angle, less on the practical sense, like Benjamin's background, more in the creating profiles of economic incentives that threat actors follow. So look forward to getting into things today, but let's go ahead and go forward. One thing I do want to say is that joining us as well is Joe Metzler from our solutions architect team. He is going to be on the ready, at the ready to answer any questions in the chat. If you get stalled out or can't log in here, or what was that link again, and what did that guy just say, he'll be the one to really help out and ensure that all of your questions get answered in the moment. Think of him as like a teaching assistant in a big university class. You know, he's walking around making sure everybody has the supplies and materials and has their questions answered. We're going to be using the Illuminate product set today, which, as you can see on the slide, identifies all the different data sets that it combines and how it's purposed in CTI, SecOps, as well as in third party. You just go to the next one, Benjamin. Yep. Real quick, because again, we're virtual here. If we were in a physical location, we'd be able to say, hey, anybody raise your hand if you have, like that sort of thing. But what we wanted to do was just kind of get a feel for the room, because what we end up doing is based on, you know, who you are, what your role is, how long you've used threat intelligence, things like that. That allows us to very quickly kind of nuance things and go down certain paths that are most applicable to the group here. And so, yeah, first question out of the gate, just how long have you used threat intelligence? And so, Barrett, if you pull up that poll question, folks will be able to answer. And it really ranges from, you know, never at all to, you know, under 2 years, then that mid-range, like 2 to 5 years or 5 years plus. And just trying to get, again, a feel for the virtual room here, so that way we can tailor things toward your experience level.
And can everybody see my screen clearly? I just got a message that it was a little blurry. I just want to make sure that the presentation is clear. Can you guys see it okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
It's clear. Good on my end. Getting a couple of blurry responses. So anyway, again, just having a 4-part answer here. There's no wrong answer. But just trying to get a feel for how long you've been exposed and have experience with threat intelligence. Sometimes when we go into certain concepts, it helps us to tailor things as well. It does seem like, per usual, Benjamin, the majority of the folks here have less than half a decade, whether it's none, less than 2 years, or between 2 and 5. And so that's also very helpful to know. Really appreciate folks being able to answer that. One more real quick before we get into stuff, and that's, how you use it. So this is, again, sort of multiples, so you're allowed to select, but the organization leverages threat intelligence in these different areas, these different use cases we have. So we have out there incident response, vulnerability management, strategic planning, third-party risk is a common one, counterattack. If you're going on the offensive, takedowns, when you find those things out there. So just wanted you to be able to select the various ways that you're using those. That way we can just, again, tailor things to those specifics. Make sure that you're getting practical answers. So just give it a couple moments here.
Yeah, the reason why we ask these is we'll slant the information to your viewpoint so we can make it more meaningful to you. And that's the reason why we ask these questions. Yeah,
because we'll go on and on about IR, but if everybody here is doing vuln management, that's the primary thing, then it's kind of useless.
Yeah, so 76% incident response, 67% vulnerability management, 33% strategic planning, 52% third party and risk management, and 33% counterattack and takedown. Okay, so one thing that we'll get into today is we're launching a vuln intel piece. So if you have Illuminate, you will get that for free, and you'll be able to see some cool stuff. So we'll show that later.
Yeah. So we may ask a couple more questions later, just given how the audience goes along here. But we'll go ahead and head into a few other things. We have set up a lab environment, okay? And everybody's need to use the same credential. We're going to burn down the lab at the end of the day. Okay. So really important that we all grab those credentials, utilize those. You should have gotten an invitation to create a community account when you registered, and that will be helpful. But this will now allow you to get into the lab environment, which again will go for the duration of today. But again, after the session is over and you get the exercises and you want to do that slow paced version, like Benjamin was talking about earlier, you'll probably want to get just your own trial, which is free, goes on for 30 days. And then you'll see, your own attack surface instead of this, lab environment. And again, you have 30 days to play around with it, do the use cases, invite your friends to join the party and all of that. Yeah. But here is the lab environment detail. But Benjamin, you want to talk a little bit about how we've structured this one?
So in the chat, I'm going to be pasting some links. So to make it easy for you, so there's no typos, you don't go someplace that you're not supposed to and get infected. So I put in the link to log into RiskIQ. So you click on that link and then you see the credentials in front of you, ctw@threattracking.com. And then the password is RiskIQ with a capital R at 123p. And then once you log in, then we'll be ready to go. And so I'm going to copy these and put them into, I'll type them in real quick, and then we will have them in here. So anybody that comes late, they'll be able to see it.
So welcome to the lab environment. And a couple of things that we need to clarify going into today's fun stuff. You just go to the next slide real quick. We'll clarify a couple of points that are kind of important. One is the types of tools we'll be using. We encourage using bookmarks. So hybrid analysis and the community edition will be front and center today. Again, using that lab environment credential. But if you go to the
go ahead.
Next one. Okay. Now we do want to let you know today's even more significant. We always give this disclaimer. Okay. What we do at RiskIQ is we map the internet so you don't have to. Okay, so that's all, rhymey and stuff, but the reality is it's live information, okay? This is directly from the interwebs. It's real, okay? So when we're going and clicking around things, there is a high likelihood that you're going to be bumping into adversary infrastructure. In fact, it's kind of by design. We want to encourage you, only use the links that we give and make sure we're using our best judgment when it comes to interacting with these malicious systems. Right. So that's sort of the disclaimer. It's live, it's real. This isn't fake or phony or sandboxed up and containerized. Right. It's real, it's from the web, and it's live right now. So you always want to have that air gap between you and the bad person, and that's why we're using these tools. Right. So that's the big thing that we're trying to show is you're not going there directly. You're not giving up anything to the threat actor that you're investigating them, and you're not bringing anything malicious to your machines or to your organization. Correct. And so with that, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to discuss today. So adversary threat tools, okay? There are several different categories and types, and we're going to look at a few examples within each. First of all, we have our open source commercial tools. We use these all the time in red teaming. For example, Metasploit. I mean, there's a poll question for you. Who's used Metasploit? Right? We've all used it. We use it all the time. It's a great red teaming tool. It's a great way to do some pen testing. It's usually sporadic. Don't leave the door open, by the way, when you're done using it for your pen testing. That's where things go haywire sometimes. But they are out there and they're re-weaponized. And then they're also variants and distributed widely. And so understanding how to use these things, especially the Metasploit, is an important aspect. But sorry, I cut you off there, Benjamin. You're going to.
When you think about like the adversaries, they don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have resources. They're limited just like we are. So they're going to reuse things that are out there. So they use open source and commercial tools to do some of their attacks. And so Metasploit and Cobalt Strike can be used for good, but it can also be used for bad. And so when we go look at this infrastructure, it doesn't mean all of it is bad. It just means that it will have a mixture of both. And if you want to protect your organization against these things, you might want to block everything except your own red team stuff that you're using.
Correct. And so Cobalt Strike, Metasploit as a couple of examples of these commercial tools that are oftentimes intended benevolently to get ahead of such threat behavior, but can be repurposed in that way. Earlier this week, we saw Lemon Duck, Lemon Cat come out, and a lot of good research there that was performed by Microsoft Security. The command and control aspect that we all fear and we all are concerned about, but you would be astounded by just how much adversary infrastructure is out there that's already entangled with you, your attack surface, and your third parties and those digital dependencies and relationships. We live on the internet now. And so we're constantly entangled and constantly bumping into new neighbors. The threat actor, I mean, that's always where they've been living. They've been living out there forever and trying to get inside the castle. But then what we did is we dissolved the walls of the castle and turned everything inside out. And so when the enterprise started to live outside its own firewalls and its network became the internet itself, they got new neighbors. And those neighbors are sort of adversarial. And so now it's much easier to get access to an enterprise when they're bumping up next to you as an adversary. And there are a lot of vulnerabilities hidden in plain sight, a lot of distributable tools that can be repurposed, ready for exploit. We're going to look at a couple there, looking at the beef.
Yeah, so the beef is the browser exploitation framework. And when I came across this, I was like, wow, let me see if there's any videos. And there was a really good video that I saw. It was very long, and I took a small piece of it that we're going to show how it's used. Because when I saw this happen, I go, oh, I suspect this happened to me a couple times when I visited websites. So it's something that you should be aware of, so you can see it and understand it, and then you will be educated and you'll know if you ever see this. So it's pretty cool. And then we have, when you think about like things on the internet, hackers sometimes go after embedded firmware. So there was an attack that APT31 was taking home routers and reconfiguring them to be proxies for them to send traffic through. It was very, very cool. So we'll investigate that. And then we're going to look at the Jupyter notebook that ties into that data that was released to get some more information.
Yeah. And then finally, we're going to conclude the day with, again, it's interesting when you look at adversary infrastructure. A lot of times when we think about threats, we think about threat actors, we think about persons. I mean, I know it has the cliche of, the person in the hoodie, right? That whole thing, sitting in front of their laptop. But in reality, there's a reason those faces are always blacked out. We don't know who these people are. And one of the things we do all the time is we try to understand, what makes them tick, what's their behavior like, what are their incentives and motivations, and what's their favorite color, and who do they like to vacation with in the spring. And we try to understand these people in this sort of like intimate way at that personal level, which is always elusive and is always changing. These are groups. There's thousands of them, not just the named APTs, right? And even within the named APTs, there's an entirely different ecosystem that's funding them, their alliances with them. It's just a headache to try to understand all of that. Right. But something that's easy to understand, something that is much more simple and much more scalable is infrastructure. When you fingerprint the adversary infrastructure, you are able to shield yourself from the thousands of loaded guns out there without needing to know which threat actor is operating it. And that's really the key here. If we had the same sort of tenacity to understand threat infrastructure, the same way we do profiling the threat actor, we could shield ourselves from a lot of things. And obviously too, in this opportunistic world that these threat actors are operating in now, their infrastructure is everywhere. And so are our services and protocols that sort of signal out that we have an open window. And this opportunism scale, from targeted to opportunistic on this spectrum that they're residing on, they're not getting away from targeted attacks, but honestly, the opportunism kind have become so much easier with digital transformation, with so many organizations bumping up into the threat actor space out in the internet. And so that opportunism can be easily done by a quick scan of which services and protocols that you're signaling are open game. And so we're going to look at some of those. What are they? How do they work? And what are they signaling to a threat actor that may make me an easy mark? Okay, so real basics today, just what are these tools and how can I signal to that? But in reality, we're all big one family here. The RiskIQ community is 100,000 plus security professionals. Many of you that are here today, a part of that. there's some real challenges. And we're just going to take through just a few things. Okay. I mentioned the first one. We let digital eat the world. Okay. And so now we have just a mind-bogglingly number of attacker targets. All of those assets are quite diverse. They're constantly changing. Their substance of what makes them continues to change, and they're always expanding. And I mean, in an elastic way. It doesn't. The attack surface doesn't grow in this nice incremental monotonic way. It doesn't grow like that or change like that. It does it at random spurts and bursts, and it's very elasticized. So we can't really see what's going on. The second problem is that even when we do see what's going on, it's very difficult to find out what really matters and what can I prioritize that's most important to me. Again, you may have a great visual onto APT 29. Everybody's very concerned with that one. What are they doing? What are they thinking about? What malwares are they currently deploying and so forth? But is that really pertinent to me? Is there anything in my own attack surface that's relevant that I should actually be concerned about? And so getting an insight that's relevant to me that I can actually do something with is sometimes difficult. Then oftentimes we don't know exactly what to do and to get the outcome that we want. And it's more of trying to figure it out. And let me Google that for you in terms of remediation strategies and exactly what procedures and steps to take. So we need some actionability ultimately to get to that scaled defense. That's what we're all striving for. These are the challenges in that sense of your mission, if you choose to accept it, like the things we're going to have to deal with to get really leveled up in leveraging intelligence to find adversaries, to eliminate threats, and to reduce our overall risk in this new world that we've created. And so if we just go to the next one. It's real simple the way that we're going to look at this today. Okay, most of us are familiar with the logic of endpoints. So if we think about our attack surface and like the device side of that, pretty simple. We have something bad happen on one endpoint. We analyze it, rip it apart, and then provide out response insights that then are applied to all. On the internet side, it's a little bit different, but the same, which is something happens on the internet. We graph a relationship because instead of a process being the thing that's exploited, right? Exploiting a CPU process at its ultimate basic level on an actual machine, it's the relationship, the way that the internet itself relates to one another, relates to the people, objects, services, ports, processes that are happening on the internet. And now understanding those graph relationships and providing insight out there to protect that interwoven web of the attack surface in an internet context. And that's the digital side of that attack surface. But the logic is the same on both. Bad thing, analyze it, rip it apart, and then apply insight to all for greater protection. And so real simple, just security for your other endpoint. If we go to the next one, that's kind of what we do. We handle that right side, that digital side. We map the internet and we keep doing that. Again, so you don't have to. It gives you 4 things out of that. There's a unified attack surface. There's a tailored one for yourself. That's in the lab environment you're going to see. We map the adversary's infrastructure, their attack surface, so you can understand them, and then adapt the defenses as those things commingle out on the internet. That way, your defenses are adapted as your attack surface changes, and your defenses are adapted as their attack surface changes. And that is expressed in the various ways of the platform. Attack surface intelligence, SecOps, CTI, third party. What's it like to be a third party of yours or a digital supplier, any particular, or even not even a digital supplier, but a physical goods supplier, but you have a digital relationship because of that business partnership. Step into their attack surface, see what it's like, validate if they've actually remediated some of their vulnerabilities.
Payment card processor, could be anything.
Yeah. Payment card processor. And then finally, vulnerability intelligence, understanding what's getting exploited out there so that you can, again, prioritize what really counts, what really matters. About 10% of vulnerabilities have actual exploits in the last 30 days, about 10%. Yeah. Okay. So which ones should I care about? And that needs to factor in, it's not just that it is exploitable, it's an RCE, but is someone actually doing that? Is there chatter about it? And then where is it in my attack surface, that kind of that left and right side there to bring it together and understand which threat actors, which third parties are most at risk for these vulnerabilities.
And I'll show that today.
We're going to go into that. Yeah.
So here's the agenda. So we talked about what we're going to talk about, but how does this data come in? I'm just going to quickly go through and we're going to jump into the exercises. So as we go out there and we have probes and sensors, and we have crawlers that go out there and act like a real user, to be able to go to a web page or go to a search engine, search for something, keep state, present cookies, and act like the intended victim. When that data comes in, we understand the internet, what's coming in and going out of every website in the world. We do over 2 billion web requests a day. We see over 250,000 new domain resolutions a day. We have over 106 billion unique DNS records. We even have one of the largest mobile app store databases in the world. We have over 34 million apps. We look at ports, services, what's installed, what's running, all those things. And when that data comes in, we have security researchers, threat intel people that analyze it. They work with our data scientists to make it at scale. And that allows us to create these unique data sets and derived data sets. Now, by starting off with just like, for example, a single piece of malware, we know, oh, that malware was on this IP, that IP has this cert, and we build this infrastructure chain out. When we talked with the community, we found out that most of the people that were using RiskIQ, our Illuminate product, they were looking at published open source intelligence, trying to find more information about it to see if it applies to them, if there was any commingling, or if it was expanded from what was published. So what we did was we created a threat intel portal, and that's the homepage, where we took those open source articles. We grabbed all those indicators out of images and hard to get things, so there was no typing required. And then we enhanced it and put our own threat intel people would look at that and expand out those understandings of those published articles and give you more context, more information, take you further down an investigation path. So a lot of our articles will have that. We also launched the reputation score. So if you look at a domain or IP address, this is dynamic. Every single time you put it in, we go out and gather the data. So think of it, if a website was blocked and we said, hey, it had malware on there, but the person corrects it and it no longer has the malware, then the score would be different. So we're able to tell you on every time you run it, look at that information and see if our telemetry shows any changes, whether it's worse or it's better or it's the same. And so we're able to look at that initial piece of open source intelligence, add the RiskIQ enterprise indicators that we've added, and then also give you that reputation. And Josh, do you want to talk about this slide?
Sorry, I was on mute there. I wanted to make sure there wasn't any background noise or anything. But all the conclusion of that is the attack surface is complex, as I mentioned earlier. It's expansive in irregular, chaotic ways. Unpredictable, continuously changing, very dynamic, and it allows a lot of threats and risk to hide in plain sight, as we say. And I say it's plain sight. That's a little bit, reductionistic. The point is, from their perspective, they're hiding in plain sight. Like, they can't see me. And so from their perspective, they think, they're somewhat noticeable, but they're not. And so what happens is that this is where we have evolved from threat actors who used to be trespassers. Circa 25 years ago, the big incentive, again, like kind of attacker psychology here, the big incentive was notoriety in the clique, right? Let me break in to show my peers also in the hacking community that I could do it, right? And get that notoriety. Then it became shoplifting. Now I sneak in, try to be unnoticed, and swipe away something of relatively limited value. And then it became robbery. Let me go in and actually take it from the cash register. And now we're in a world where it's conquest. Really, when you think about it, it's enslavement, right? There is enslaving your resources, ransom, full-on takeover, and denying service from legitimate people. It's conquest now, okay? That's the way that the tactics have evolved so much. But sorry, Benjamin, this is a mind map that you were staking out and wanted to talk about too.
Yeah, so when you think about exactly what Josh is saying, you're either doing ransomware, you're stealing credentials to get access to financial credentials, to get access to credentials in the organization or to other sites. to use that machine to do other activity like bots or denial of service, create phishing, store information, email attacks, even going after like virtual currency or game currency or characters or different things, or even hurting people's reputation or posting things or doing whale attacks or targeted phishing, spear phishing attacks, to be able to get into those profiles and be able to do those things. Yeah, so this is exactly what you were talking about, Josh.
Yeah, it fans out to be a lot of different things to account for, in a lot of different ways in and out.
Yeah.
And again, we operate in the internet, not on the web, not on the internet, but in it. It has a layered component to it. It's multidimensional, and we're all swimming through this internet and bumping into each other. And so we're going to get into some of these tools now. And so again, we're just kind of keeping this at a real basic level. Like, what is certain attacker infrastructure? What are these adversarial tools? And the first one we're going to start off with are some of the open source ones we mentioned earlier, Metasploit. But Benjamin, you gathered some URLs to share with the group here. I know you're going to post it in the chat. And so we're going to show you now, like, how's this thing work? What does it really do? I hear about it all the time, but what's it do? Who's using it? And how can I spot it and mitigate myself against it, mitigate the risk against it?
So what I'm doing is I'm going to jump between screens so we can actually go through and look at these together. So what I did here was I looked at some command and control infrastructure. So if you think about, command and control infrastructure, it's where something is set up where traffic, let's say that you've been attacked, they're going to have a headquarters where signals go down to you to do something and data goes back to it, and then it goes back to the threat actor. So if you try to trace it back, you get to the command and control, but you don't get to the person who's running that command and control. So it's like the middleman. And so here's one. Metasploit has a command and control aspect. So if we take a look inside of here, this is a tool that is used for good and bad. And we have the ability to see when these are installed out on the internet. And these are ones that are publicly accessible, where as we go out there and we look at all this public data that's out there on the open web, we're finding these pieces of components of software that are running and able to identify them and map them and see where they are. So when I did a search for this, immediately you'll start to see this information, but I'm going to show you a way to open these up so we don't go down a branch and stop. So the way I like to do these investigations is I open up tabs. And the reason why I do that is if you're at the branch of a trunk and it dead ends, there's nothing else, anywhere else to go, you go back to the trunk and go down another branch. So when I do these, instead of clicking, I right click and open in a new tab. And when I do that, it gives me the ability to jump back to those tabs or to save all those tabs into a folder. And then I preserve that investigation as well. So then I can go back. So if it's at the end of the day and I want to go back in the first thing in the morning and start up right where I left off, I don't lose anything if my machine dies or something. So inside of here, when we look at these components, I'm going to show you a couple ways that we can search for them. And I gave you the links. So we were in the main screen and we looked for the Metasploit component, the command and control, and there are hosts and there are IPs. So we've mapped them both out. So if we see it on a domain or we see it directly on the IP address, we'll show you those relationships. And you'll be able to dive into them. When you drill in and you run that query and get to the advanced search, you'll see the components, but sometimes the host won't show up right away. You might need to click on it to refresh that and run that query, because sometimes millions of records come back and we want to make sure it's fast. So you might have to click on the tabs just to have it run that query and bring the data back. So as you go through, you'll start to see some tags that were in here. So here's a command and control Metasploit, but it's on a block list. So this is probably one that was used by a bad threat actor. Now, Metasploit, this one is an extensible in-memory DLL injection. And when I get into the beef will be using this to do its attack. And so we're going to show this in action. I have a video that I've downloaded, not downloaded, but I linked from the internet that we'll go through and we'll watch it because this attack was pretty cool. But by going through and looking at these different types of infrastructure and command and control, it's really important to understand how you can look for these things on your own. So if you take Metasploit, okay, I'm just going to paste this into the chat here. Okay, so I have a tool that people are using, and I'm going to go through and show you how I can see everything from the servers to the command and control out there. So if you take a look in the advanced search, so this is once you go through the main screen where it was like shows you the articles and things, I can get into this advanced search. And if I choose to look at a component, okay, I can have a very targeted search. And when I run this, it will actually go out there and give me all that information. And that's what this query is here. I just took Metasploit, went to component and searched. So it found the command and control server and just like a Kali Linux or something that's running that has Metasploit on it, okay? And you can see that there's tags already associated with these, okay? But it's very cool to be able to have this capability that if you read an article and say, oh, this is an open source red tool. Well, where is it in the world? You can go search for it and you can find this infrastructure immediately. Now, as a practitioner, what I would probably want to do at an organization is to say, hey, all those command and control servers that would be sending this traffic to me or to one of my employees potentially, I want to find those. So if I search on just that value, it will show me those things. And there are 15 servers that are out there that are listed. So I can come over and download this list, take it over to the network group and say, hey, can you make sure that there's no traffic to or from these places? Just prevent it from happening. And then I can grab also the hosts and say, these domains, please go and block these. Now, if there's any ones that we're using internally or we contract with the red team, we can whitelist those. But this is a good way just to sanitize your environment and understand these open source or commercial tools that are freely available or that have been hacked to be able to do that. So Josh, any questions or anything?
I mean, that's really what we were looking at is just sometimes looking at these things that we hear about all the time, we see all the time, but just illustrating, you know, what they do, how they operate. And so like in terms of Metaterpreter, we see these everywhere. It's oftentimes used. Oh, there it is. There's the screen. So, but the simplicity with which you can just quickly look and identify, but then additionally, make sure you're not necessarily acting too quickly by being able to whitelist those that are legitimate. Because sometimes that's what it comes down to with these open source and commercial tools is that sometimes they have a benevolent purpose. Right. Now, I know we're going to get into one that is a little less benevolent now. And if we look at beyond Metasploit, I know we wanted to take a closer look at one that is much more problematic. What is it now in terms of identifiable threat actors utilizing Cobalt Strike? I think it's over 1,000 now. I think it's like 1,100 different identifiable threat actors that have been caught in the wild, observed using Cobalt Strike. And you can answer this in the chat, by the way. And it's not one of our official poll questions. How many of you have encountered a Cobalt Strike in your environment?
Just raise your hand. Just raise your hand.
Everywhere. We see it all the time, everywhere. So, you know, a little less benevolent when it comes to this. I mean, one of the droppers recent. What dropper was using Cobalt Strike recently? Was it Kaseya? The Kaseya update?
Kaseya, they had a patch that you installed a patch, but you're actually putting Cobalt Strike on your machine. Right. If you didn't get it from Kaseya, yeah. Yeah,
highly distributable. I think we have like over 8,000 indicators now on Cobalt Strike, and it's everywhere. it's so easy to use and is highly variant
Well,
in the way that it can be repurposed and slightly altered, slightly changed to where certain indicators don't pick it up.
so it's bad when your own site has, hey, crack it and backdoor it on. This is from Cobalt Strike, from their actual blog, showing that people are taking their software, cracking it, but then adding a backdoor so they can control it. So when you think you're saving money by downloading this commercial tool and trying to use it in your organization, you're opening a huge hole, and the threat actor's getting right in. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, and you can even search for this on the internet and say, how do I crack it? What do I do? It's like, it's crazy.
It's like, your given day. Okay. So like in the morning, how do I train my puppy to go outside? How do I bake this chocolate chip, cookie recipe? And how do I deploy Cobalt Strike? I mean, it's that simple in terms of going online and finding recipes for using these tools, folks.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. But sorry, I know you wanted to get into this one because again, we see it all the time, and it's one of the most widely distributed in terms of its use. Thousands of threat actors using this all the time, and that's where we go to, as we mentioned earlier. Sometimes we can get very hyper focused on a particular threat group and the concern of a targeted attack against me. But what we're seeing in reality, in the real world, when we observe threat actors, we're seeing more opportunism, where if you have that exposed service, that exposed port, or the quick ability to drop in a threat tool like a Cobalt Strike. So we're seeing that opportunism, and it's a wide array of threat actors utilizing these things, not just a particular threat actor and a particular target against you. And so it kind of lives in both now, where you could have a targeted attack against you, but in addition to that, you have to worry about this opportunism and the ease with which it can be done.
Yeah.
So
like when we go through and I did a component search for Cobalt Strike, I have 10,439 indicators that pop up. So right there, I have a huge opportunity to protect my organization. And as we go crawl the internet, we find a new one that pops up either on a domain or an IP address, we add it to the system. So this is constantly being updated. So you can use an API and go in there and script this to go run and say, grab me the list for the day and go and block it. So this is capabilities that you have. So there's over 10,000 IPs, and let's see how many hosts. It doesn't show the hosts, they're just listed by IP, but that's huge. If you look at all the open source material out there, there's only about 2,000 that are published. So there's an additional 8,000 indicators that are in the system. And you can see that a lot of these are already tagged as malicious. So if I make this 500, let's take a quick look at the first page and see how much malicious activity we've seen. So as we go through, there's a lot of red here. Okay, so this is pretty bad. So this is just how to locate this infrastructure, and you can now utilize all of these types of tools that are out there and start searching for them, finding them, creating your list and monitoring and tracking them. Okay. And so, as we go through and we look at Cobalt Strike, you can buy this, but people are cracking it, and you might see that there's a free version out there, but there's no such thing as free when it comes to this. You can lose everything. You don't want that. Yeah. So let me just jump back to the presentation, and we'll go on to the next one so we can actually do some fun stuff. So when we're talking about the command and control server, this is that jump point, just like what we're doing. Like we're using a tool to keep us away from the bad person. Well, these command and controls are the middle place where the signals go to, they go out, gather the data, comes back, and goes to where it needs to go. So that's what these places are. So if you could look at the traffic between those, that would be phenomenal, because then you'll know who they're targeting or who've been compromised. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go through and talk about Lemon Duck and Lemon Cat. So let me copy these for you real quick, and then we'll go through this investigation and see it. Okay. Okay. So I've pasted those in. Okay. And let's go through the slides first, and then we'll drop into the investigation. So Lemon Duck is an active and robust malware that was used to use in like bot cryptocurrency mining, but now it's being used through emails and different things. That same type of, it was wiped out, but that infrastructure, the way that the tool worked, has been retooled, and now it's spread via emails. It does lateral movement, and ultimately drops tools that a human will go in and use that to gather data, steal data, implant more software, or attack other things. But it's human operated. So part of it is automated, part of it's human. So we're going to go through and take a look at that. So I have all the links about all these articles and everything in here, so you'll be able to read these and get into great detail what happened. So Microsoft published recently this article that explained how this was working, and it's a combination of the Lemon Cat and the Lemon Duck. So it might start off through a dock or a USB drive, and then it exploits and does some brute forces of RDP, which is the Windows Remote Desktop Protocol, and gets in, and then downloads, it establishes its way of communicating back, and then there's some sort of Trojan gets installed so they can see the screens, do things, and take over. And then from that, it removes any other malware that belongs to anybody else, so that it's only on that machine. And then it can patch the machine so those other things can't get back in. And then it goes through and allows that human to come in and to spread and to do phishing and from that machine. So they're actually on that machine. They have access. So if they try to log into Facebook or LinkedIn, it's from the actual authorized machine using the authorized credential. So it allows them to spread rather quickly and to be pretty successful. So it's pretty cool. So what I had done was I created a project on this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through and look at this. But since I put this project as a public project, there's some new indicators that have popped up. So it's a great opportunity to go through and say, why is it important to have a project? And then the monitoring that can occur to allow you to know when something changes. So you don't have to constantly run these queries. You can just go back to the project, look at the alerts that have happened, and see what happened with those. So because I've created this project, I will see the alerts. You won't, and then I can add them in, but you'll be able to see that in the screen.
Yeah. And so let's take a minute real quick. Let's just describe what we mean when we say a public project so that people understand. I mean, we're like a community-based organization, right? So you want to take a moment to describe the public project,
sure,
how it's used, everyone can see and participate. And again, 100,000 plus security pros are in the community. So you just want to talk about this, what you set up to show people.
Yeah. So when you create a project, there's three different types of projects. You'll have a public project, which is open to the world. Good and bad people can see it. Okay. You have a private project that can either be a team project, so everybody in your organization that has access to the same org can see it, or you have like an analyst project where it's only your own. So if you're investigating somebody internally or something internally, you can make it as a project that you can only see. So they have those three different types of projects. And Joe, are you keeping me honest? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then, so I created what was a public project. I took the indicators that were in the article, and I'll show you how I did it. And then it tagged it and it put it in there, and now it's being monitored. So all those little sliders allow me to say, hey, if this domain changes, it has a new whois registry, a new name server, a new IP, any of those things, it will then alert it. And those happen as the data comes in. So then I can add it to the project and add it to monitoring if I want, like if a new IP shows up.
Yeah. And everybody here, there's the URL. You can access this project. I guess let's just get into it.
Let's get into it. Let's get into it.
Folks, where it is.
Okay, give me a second.
And we set this up, what, yesterday? Kind of put the.
I set it up yesterday. I already, yeah. So here we go. So let's just take a second. And I'll show you how I did it. So it's just running all the queries just like you would do it. So there's this article that was published. And if I click on this article, I can actually see it. And this is the article that's in there. Now, in this article, we've pulled out all the indicators. So there were 13 different domains that were in here. So if I just copy these, okay, when I get into RiskIQ, I can come over and say projects, and I can do project, team, my project, shared project. So here are the community projects. And if I do a new project, I can look at the 3 different levels that are in here. So the team one is everybody in my org. The analyst is just for me, and the community is for everybody. So if I make this a public project, I can actually give it a name, a description. And once I do that, it allows me then to add indicators in there. So give me a second. And here's my public project. So if I add the artifacts, okay, that they're in here, I can choose the type of artifact that it is. I can paste those in, and then I can give it a tag. And at this point, I created, hey, it's either, you know, lemon duck or lemon cat, and I pasted them in, okay? So here they are. And what's really cool about this is I can look at the history. So anybody can go back on your team, or in this case, it's a public project, and see exactly what I did and when I did it and where I was in the application. So this is kind of a way to go and look at an investigation that maybe has progressed over months and look to see how it happened and what they found and where they were. So you can look at the top and see, okay, he created this, he added the blog, Benjamin went through and started adding all these indicators, and then he went through and changed it again. So it tells you exactly what I did and which indicator was added and how it was added over time. But the cool thing about this is that from these artifacts, because I created it, I get alerts. So these alerts that come in tell me, oh, this zer9g.com, the name server changed. The telephone number, so somebody updated like the who is record. So that tells me 11 hours ago that happened. Also, this pp6r1.com that was monitoring started responding to a new IP address. So I can come through and I can right click on that and open another tab and view this and say, oh, that's really cool. I want to go and add that to my project. So then that can be monitored. So in this particular case, it's hosted where there's hundreds of different domains associated with this IP address. So if I wanted to monitor it, I can either from here, I can click on it and add it, or from inside of the project, I can come over and just click on this folder and then find lemon duck. Scroll down, there's so many in here that created over time. Hold on. The first one I thought, let's see. Okay, or the, oops. So many to, here it is. So I just choose it now and I've added it, and you'll see up on my, up above, it says, hey, this has been added. And if I take a look at the artifacts and I refresh, I should have that. I have 14 indicators, and there it is. And now it's in there, okay? So this is non-malicious. It's one that there's a lot of hosting happening on that, but I can add it on here and I can turn off monitoring, for example, and I won't be alerted if a new domain gets added to that, but I can track it. So this is a way I can go through and look at these projects. One thing I wanted to do is I wanted to go through and look at one of these investigations and see if I can find any new associated things with one of these domains. So let me grab that real quick and I'll give you those URLs. So give me 1 second. Okay, it should be the cat one. Not this one. Show cat. Sorry, too many things right now on there.
We said we'd have a lot going into today.
Yeah, so we'll start from the project. So it's the ones with cat. So I'm just going to open those up in another tab just to keep these in here. And I'm just going to close these out and we're going to go through. And one of them had some cool stuff I just saw this morning. So I'm going to open up there's 3 of them that have the word cat in it. And so I think it's this download one. So I'm going to open that one up. Okay. And let's look at subdomains. And one of the subdomains, okay, let's go. Okay, so it's one that didn't have a lot in there. Okay, where's the other cat? So we have SQL cat, Netcat. I think it's this one. Components. Host pairs. Netcat. Okay. Download. Okay, here we go. So it's this one. So let's take a look at this link here. I'm pasting it in now.
You put it, yeah, chat. There you go.
Okay, so now it's in chat. So when we looked at this one, this was SQL SQLnetcat.com. So I'm looking at host pairs. So when you think about host pairs, it's something that's coming in or going out of a website. So there's a parent-child relationship. So think of it this way. If your child had something, you can go take it from your child and say, nope, I'm taking that. And your parent can probably go to you and say, no, 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 I'm taking that from you. So there's this relationship where you can reach in, grab something, bring it out. So if we take a look at what we have on the screen here, the cause here are scripts. So that means this shell, okay? If you take a look where the child host name was this shell.sqlnet.cat, okay? So I'm going to filter it where that child host name, okay? So I'm going to look at the child host name, and let me zoom in a little bit. I forgot to do that, so you can see this a little bit better, okay? So if we look at these, where the child host name was that the shell 2, okay? We can see all of these websites are reaching in and grabbing a script from here. So in this particular one, this is like how those droppers and things were working, where, hey, you go to a website and it runs the script and then maybe drops something on your machine, or it updates or patches for those vulnerabilities that are out there. So by looking at these different things in here, I can look at one of these and say, what is this? Let's right click on this and open this up in another tab. Now that I do that, I can now look at this investigation and say, hey, tell me about this particular IP address. Now the whois record, okay, let's take a look and we go, okay, it's privacy protected, so there's not much information in here. We'll look at the certificates, and when we look at these certificates, let's see what type they are. They're Cloudflare. So all these are hidden behind, Cloudflare or Let's Encrypt, the free certificate authority. So this shows you how I can now branch out and say, hey, this particular one is associated with this subdomain. And think of a subdomain can have completely different infrastructure than what the main domain has. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to look at every single subdomain and look at the infrastructure and look at all the things around there. But by examining that first place that we looked at the SQL cat, okay? The subdomains that were listed here, we saw that there was that other one that we were looking at, which was that shell particular one domain. And so I can take a look at the host pairs, and we should see that shell 2 SQLnet.cat. So that was a subdomain off the one that we were monitoring, but this particular one shows that they're running scripts from there. So I assume that this is related to that infrastructure, and I would add it to the project, and then it would be monitored. And if there's a new IP or something else happens, I would see it in there. And you can see that we've already tagged it as a skimmer. So that IP address that we saw back in June on that one day, a skimmer was running there.
Yep.
Okay.
And now everybody has access to that public project and can participate with it.
Yes.
We encourage you as you're out there hunting and identifying these things. Lemon Duck, Lemon Cat is sort of fresh when it comes to infrastructure identification where they are. And so as you're out there doing some of these labs, I think somebody asked earlier, are we going to send out the recordings and stuff? Yes. And
Yes.
as you use those public projects and start to dabble into these things a bit more, add it into the project. We're helping the whole community when we do that.
So, yeah.
Okay, now I'm getting ahead of you, right?
Yes.
No, I'm slowing you down. That's what I'm
Yes.
doing. I'm slowing you down. So here's the thing. Okay, this one's a troublesome thing.
Yeah.
Okay, but we've been talking about all these various tools and infrastructure and out there, and where are the loaded guns? Are any of them pointed against me? You know, then the third or fourth question on the list is, you know, who's holding the gun? But this one in particular is most troubling to me.
Yes.
You were talking about
Me too.
Because I bet I've been beefed, you know, and that's.
I have. I can tell you this after watching this. I have been beefed. Yes.
I've been beefed, I'm sure. And the thing is that, you know, that's not nearly as sympathy inducing, you know, when I have been hacked or my account's been taken over, like those kind of things, like, oh, you poor thing. But you go and tell somebody you've been beefed, they're going to say, like, what are you talking about? So these frameworks, I'm astonished, Benjamin, how many recipe cards are out there, you know, the proverbial recipe card, the videos, the ease of setting it up. I am certain that I've been beefed, you've been beefed, probably more than I've been fished.
Well, let me put it this way. A long time ago, before when two-factor authentication was just coming up on board, I had a pop-up that said, hey, you're logged out of Facebook. And I went to Facebook and put in I went to Facebook and put my credentials in. And then the next day, I went to log in and my password was changed and two-factor authentication was enabled. And it wasn't to my device. So I couldn't get into my own Facebook. And I had to actually send my ID in, a picture of my ID, to get my account back. And so after seeing this, I was like, that's how they did it. This is what happened. So we're going to watch a short snippet of a video. It's 6 minutes because there are 3 different attacks. And it's so important for you to see this because you'll know that you need to protect yourself once you see the capabilities and how easy it was. I was like, oh my goodness, I need to let you see this because once you find it, then you're going to go out to these beef command and control servers and say, yeah, we're blocking these. I don't want this to be accessible to my organization. And then if you do need to use beef, you can set it up and you can have it all going and you can do your red team, but it's on your white list. But this was crazy. So this browser exploitation framework is used by pen testers. This is how they go in and they do their testing and you've probably seen it in movies where they go, yeah, they clicked on it. They went to the website. Okay, now they're in the website. I'm going to send them the command to have them log into Gmail. Okay, I got their credentials. Now we're in their email. I'm going to send a message to so-and-so to get an ID made for us. Whatever it is, I was just like, I was amazed at this capability. So on YouTube, and let me give you these links real quick. Okay.
Yeah, and I know we were talking about this beforehand. We're about an hour in here. The thing is, folks, I think personally, we show them the whole video of how it works.
Yeah, I think we need to see it. So it's 6 minutes. And so instead of watching for 35 minutes, you can go and watch the whole 35 minutes. I just took 6 minutes out of it and said, this is like showing you like not how to set it up, but like the attacks that were happening and how easy they were. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay quiet and we're going to play this video so you can see it. And then you're going to go, uh-oh. So here it goes.
One of the things I want to do is to be able to keep some sort of persistence, right? So what I can try to do is go to browser and hook domain and then do something called redirect browser. Let me try to expand this. redirect browser with an iframe. Okay, so redirect browser iframe, and then give it the IP address of this local computer, which was 237.
Well, they could have given a domain,
So
a real IP.
10.1.0.237, and then we want to redirect to, let's say, koreatimes.com. koreatimes.com. Okay, so let me pull this over a little bit. Now watch what happens to the test web page whenever I click execute. So this is the attacker's computer. This is the victim's computer. So if I click execute, then you notice that it's redirected the victim's computer to koreatimes.com. However, if you look in the address bar, you can still see the infected or the malicious website. Right, so it just redirected, but it's using something called an iframe to show koreatimes.com while still giving the attacker access to the system. So we've already so far taken over the browser and then redirected the user to a web page that just looks like a normal web page, so they can browse around a news website or Facebook or whatever it is. Imagine that I sent you a link to Facebook, and then you logged in, and you kept Facebook or you kept your mail up the entire time. I could still be, I guess, attacking your system. If we go into, so what I really wanted to show was social engineering. So imagine that you're viewing this news website and everything looks normal, and this is a little bit suspicious, but I would use a different name or domain name if I'm looking at this. And you're reading this story about Indian head peak. I don't know. You're reading some story. Then all of a sudden, let's do fake flash update actually. So maybe Korea Times uses flash. So we can do something like 10.1.0.237, was it? And then we have a payload, and then this is basically a program that we want the user to download. Okay, so while the user is looking at pictures of rocks and things like that, then we can execute this command. And then all of a sudden, Adobe Flash Player is available. Do you want to install it? Well, you click install, and then whatever program I put in this location, the user will download it. So if I just call it Adobe Flash Player, then most people would save it and install it onto their computer, but it's actually a virus, right? So this is called Beefmaster Zip. Obviously, that's not something that a user should download and install. And it could be called Flash Player, so it looks like it's a legitimate download. Again, let me execute that. I'm going to cancel this. If I execute that again, look at how realistic this looks. I mean, this looks like it's probably Facebook, and most people are trained to just kind of install. Let's look at another one. So let's say Google phishing, for example. So again, I need to put in the attacker's IP address. Most of the time, it's not going to be the attacker's actual computer, but 237. Okay. Gmail logout. Okay. Execute. And then it has redirected us. So let's say it went to the news website, and then after a little bit, you got redirected to a Google Mail login. So then you have to put in your username again, and I'll just say test, and then password test123, and then sign in. Would you like to store your password? Nope. And then enter your email or phone number. And this is actually at google.com. So look at it before. It was at 10.0.1.232. Yeah, well, now I need to go do the thing again. It was at 10.1.0.232, and it was asking for your Google credentials. So now if we click on this, you can see result, username test, password test123.
Got my credentials.
So for example, Pretty Theft. Pretty Theft is a funny one. Because let's say we can choose from Facebook, LinkedIn, Windows, YouTube, Yammer, iOS, generic, whatever. And if we do Facebook, for example, like most people have a Facebook account. Now, stealing a Facebook account by itself maybe isn't that interesting because Facebook does a lot of checks whenever you're trying to log in from an unknown IP address. But if I can use your browser, if I can take over your browser, then maybe I can log in as you from your browser. That might be possible. So 237. Okay. So now, again, I'm looking at news. I don't know what news this is. I'm looking at it and I execute. Then it asks me Facebook session timed out. And this looks legitimate. And a lot of news websites have Facebook. Like Facebook, the icon is right here. So it kind of makes sense. Like the user is just thinking, oh man, I need to log back into Facebook if I want to view this. And if I click anywhere else, it doesn't go away, right? So I kind of have to enter it. So I just put in test and test 1, 2, 3, 4, log in, and then I'm back to the web page, no problem, right? So it doesn't seem like anything happened, but if I go back to the suspect computer and I look at the command, then the answer was test 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I have your username and password. That's why two-factor authentication, like for example, phone numbers or key fobs or one-time passwords are so important, because if I can steal this information, I can log in as you unless you have a second factor. Then I would also have to take over that second factor, and it's a little bit more difficult.
So
one of the things
so this is why when I saw it, I go, I want to show this because I've fallen victim to this. I know I have. I have no doubt over the years. This is not something new. This has been around, I think, since like 2017 or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
The
it's
thing is,
a lot.
I read yesterday when we were going to be talking about this beef.
Yeah.
Do you know the average user, how many Chrome extensions they have?
No.
18.
18. Okay.
18. The average user has 18 Chrome extensions. Okay. Just the extensions. Okay. We're not talking about Adobe, right? And updating Flash or somehow your social media popping up. We're talking about even like enterprise grade extensions that people use in their browser, being able to game the system via using a beef and being able to look into the extensions they're using and using those in a very customized way to give the user an experience where they think, oh yeah, let me re-authenticate into this extension that I'm using because I like using my Chrome extensions. Right. Like this one was with a lot of IE, but the interesting thing about these beefs is how simple they are, how many there are, and the cloaking effect that they take. Just because the user isn't even looking at the URL flashes that are happening up there, and with a simple typo squat, right? They're really deceived. I mean, their eyes just glaze over it, right? If the URL is somewhat similar, and they don't really think much of it, and then presto, bingo, they're in. That simple. And with all these like news sites and things, they change all the time. So if you look at it, you go, oh yeah, it's the same content. Oh, but the URL changed, but you're not going to notice it because with all the Cloudflare and everything out there, people are standing up infrastructure, and it could be anywhere to make it peppy and speedy for your region. Yeah, it was crazy. So this was now I go, okay, now I want to find these. Now I want to, so I'm going to drop out and show you what to do. So I gave you some links. So let's look at the beef real quick. So inside of here, I'm just going to. Real quick, it looks like there are some questions coming through. Was there blurriness on the screen too? Was everyone able to see that, Joe? Was everyone able to see that video presentation of the?
So let me do this. I'm going to stop my screen and I'm going to reshare because I shared it with sound and optimized for video, and that might have caused an issue. So I'm now sharing my. I'm going to share my screen. You should see it again. Do you see my my browser?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we're seeing your Finder window right now.
Oh, my Finder window. Okay. So let me.
Yeah, all your files there.
Okay. So wrong screen. So let me share.
But Joe, what are you seeing on your end? What are folks asking? Were they able to?
Yeah, so just one question around logging into that test account that you guys provided.
Yes.
It seems like it's showing invalid credentials, so I've been troubleshooting that on my end.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So everyone was able to see the beef exercise there. It's a little 6-minute clip that we took you through, just showing.
But you have the links so that you can go out and watch it as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So what I did was I searched for beef inside of RiskIQ. And if you take a look at the components, you'll notice that there's a command and control beef exploitation framework. Okay, if you right click or open that up in another tab, you will see all of the IP addresses that where beef is installed. And if you click on the hosts, you'll see all the hosts that were set up as well. So this will give you the capability of now having access to these command and controls and seeing where they are and where they're being added in the world. Some of them might be legitimate, some might not be. So if you're not using it, you should be blocking it. And if you're using it, you know what address and domain it's going to be coming from. So this is a way for you to find these, understand the potential threat to you and your users. And now when you get that flash update or you have to log into your things, you might be closing out your browsers, going back in and making sure that you're fine, because that's what I'll be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now one of the things, when you go back to search, what's just the scale of indicators we're seeing here?
For this particular one, it's not too big. There's only 59 of them.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not huge, but you don't need that many.
No.
You know,
And,
if you create a web page and you wrote a blog on something, a bad guy can write a blog on something that's really cool, really important, and you go to the blog and now you're susceptible to be attacked. They can post something on Facebook and say, this is a really cool article, and you click on it and you open it up and you're now hooked.
yeah. And and the thing is that whether you're just a run-of-the-mill consumer, you're a partner in somebody's supply chain, you're one of those digital dependencies we were talking about earlier. I mean, you have no idea what they're looking at. What particular beefs are in their environment? Are they interacting with? What are their relationships like? Where have they seen takeover of browser use? And let's just face it, this is how we do apps now. Apps are in browsers. That's how we do our applications from a consumer, a business user, or just someone just perusing the internet. We're doing it all within browsers. And so this is where we spend the majority of our time, and exactly where we can be fooled, because our eyes are on the content of the page that we're on or the app that we're operating, not necessarily the functions that are performing. And so it's a really good hack. It's a really good opportunistic, as we mentioned earlier, way of seeing who can I game. Let me put this out there and then see who can I game, who can I get to click, and then through opportunism find my way into those open windows.
So I took one of those command and controls, and there was an IP, and I clicked on the IP and I put it in the chat, and it gives you a domain name that it resolved to, and it was only online for 1 day. Now the analyst insights that are coming back, we have CrowdStrike installed, and so we're using CrowdStrike on all of our laptops, and so that intel that's coming in and saying, hey, this is criminal. It's part of Cobalt Strike. There's a rat there. So this beef is also being used with Cobalt Strike, this particular one. So it's pretty pretty bad, but it was only being used for 1 day. And this was the domain that it was associated with. And if we take a look at that, and if I open that up in another tab, let's see where this goes. And it's now on a different IP address. And it was just up just a day ago. So yeah, it hasn't been crawled by RiskIQ yet. So it was just up. So now it's being reused, that bad domain. So this is the type of things that you can do and investigate. And I would block this IP and this domain to be safe. Yeah, but this is what's out there.
Now, folks, we're going to get into something a little bit more at home. So we saw some interesting stuff come out recently about Netgear. And when it comes to firmware attacks, when on the machines that we operate every day, of course, we have secure boot, we have firmware protection. It's very sensitive. A lot of the times, if you're gonna drop a persistence module in there or something, it's gonna require physical access. But what's interesting about this one here, I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, go ahead.
What is through the HTTPD authentication vulnerability. And doing it in home routers to serve as proxy. And there they are. So we have the links up here.
I'm trying to send them in chat, and for some reason it wasn't letting me paste it in. It's giving me like a weird beep when I do it.
It's probably that case where there's too many links. That's the thing. This thing's brand new and there's already this much.
You're true. Yeah, I'm going to cut it down. I'm going to cut it down.
To cut it. It's like a few at a time.
Yeah, you're right. That was it.
Okay. So.
Okay.
So this is going to be one that also, folks, that we're gonna work with the JSON here in a little bit with some Jupyter Notebook stuff. But firmware is an interesting thing, and here in particular, we now have an infrastructure tooling, adversary infrastructure instrumentation that is tied to an APT 31. And so Benjamin, I know you were looking into this one. I guess it was on Tuesday when we started doing a little research on this. So you want to tell us what you found?
Yeah. So when you think about threat infrastructure, it doesn't mean that they own the infrastructure.
Right.
This was infrastructure that belonged to real end users that was repurposed for bad. And so I went through and I said, okay, if that's the case, using RiskIQ, can I find more of that infrastructure? Because there was only like 100 indicators. And I go, there's more than 100 Netgear routers that are potentially susceptible to this. Can I find those? And so that was my thinking, was I want to find the full infrastructure chain of all of these particular Netgear routers out there in the world. Because if I was an organization, I would want to make sure my employees don't have these, and potentially block them, because if they haven't been patched, they could be susceptible to this. Now, what was really funny was when I went through and was talking to one of our solution architects about this, she mentioned, I got a physical letter in the email telling me to patch my Netgear firmware to upgrade it. So I know that people had got letters and told, hey, you need to patch it because it's so bad. So when we take a look at this, there was a vulnerability in Netgear routers version 2200 version 1. So when I go through now and I search for this, we're not looking for a particular firmware version, because you might not be able to see that from the public internet, but I can tell it's that type of router. Okay. So I found over 30,000 routers. Okay. So this attack was on HTTP authentication, and they were able to get in and get to the login prompt and get into these routers, like reset them and get into to configure them to become a proxy. So traffic would go through these different Netgear routers and then go out to the world and they do the bad. So if you traced it back, it went to an end user and not to APT 31. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for Netgear, and I'm going to show you how to find it. And then we're going to look for the value. And then we're going to go through and look for the different router versions. And then we're going to find the one that we're talking about, and then we're going to examine it. And then we're going to go through and look at the post that somebody from Microsoft security team posted, where he gave a link to a JSON file. And then I worked with Mark Kendrick here at RiskIQ, and he helped me write a Jupyter Notebook script that takes in the JSON file and then does some stuff with it. So if you have other indicators that might be in a JSON file, you can leverage the script. And if you want the script, just let us know, and we'll send it out when we send out the presentation to you. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and look at the Netgear, and we'll see all the different versions. And then we're going to look for the particular one that we're looking for. and then show you what we found. Okay, so let me just fire that up and we'll take a look at it. So here we go. So I saw this article that came out on the 21st, and it linked to a Twitter account, and that Twitter account talked about a French site that had some indicators, about 100 indicators. So when you go through, and we were looking at these articles, it's really important to understand, you don't have to have the article inside of RiskIQ to do some investigation. You can leverage that open source article that might not be inside of RiskIQ yet and go through and find out a lot more information. So the security advisor that came out talked about certain versions. They're all associated with this DGN 2200. So if you have that router, better patch it because you're probably compromised. And so we start off by going to RiskIQ and searching for Netgear. Easiest way to do it. And the search options that I have is I'm looking at the intelligence card, or I can tell it to go directly to the advanced search from here. In this particular case, I'm keeping it on the intelligence card, and I'll show you how to jump over to that advanced search. So if we look at the components, and I'm going to the one on the IP address first, it's really easy just to come over, you right click on the value and you say open another tab. So now when that pops up, I'm going to see any component that was associated with that, but I want to see like the version number and get more detail, not just that there was Netgear here. So what I've done is I'll come up here and change this to component being Netgear, okay, and then searching from there. And let me see the easiest way to do it. There's a better way to do it. Okay. Here, I'm going to paste this in. Here it is. So by changing that to component, you search, you should start to see all of these values associated with it. Okay. Now I'm looking for that 2100 DGN 2100. So if we go back, DGN 2100. So what I did was this, okay? I copied that particular version, okay? And when I'm in here now, I'll go back to the one that has these version numbers in here. If I pick one, I'm just gonna pick one of them, okay? So if you look at the search bar, okay? This is going in and looking for that network device that's Netgear in that particular version. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna paste in that version number, okay, and hit enter. And now I see just those versions, okay? So this is a way for me to be very specific and look for a particular version, not see everything in the world, every Netgear router, but just this particular type of router. And now when I do that, I come across, I have 30,382 devices that are there. Okay, if I click on the host names, you probably won't see any because you're not associating a DNS with it. So these are all IP addresses that are hanging off people's homes or businesses with that. And so now I have all of these routers that are here. So I could go in and download this list and throw it into my SIM. I could block it. I could do a lot of stuff with it. Okay, but in that article, it linked to some indicators. So if we take a look at those indicators, here's the French article, and I have this cool extension that probably can be exploited, where I can say translate this to English, and now it's translated to English for me. So I use this all the time because we're looking at data that's everywhere. But there was also a link to these indicators in here.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, these guys are the ones that last fall were successful with the Finnish parliament attack.
right.
And so the lawmakers in Finland, they got all their email addresses and so forth. But also, I think it was on the 19th of July, like this year, even the president of the United States condemned this group, and in a statement across the various allies. And one of the things in particular that they do, ABG31, and now think about this, okay? So you have these Netgear routers sprayed throughout the world. used as proxy hiding and so forth. But their basic favorite play is to hit MSPs. Okay. And so when you talk about that sort of click, boom, mass distribution, I mean, it's the same model as Orion and Sunburst of hit here, spray out, and there's that opportunism again. The opportunism within these Netgear routers to hide, and this particular group, APT31, is most notable that they go after MSSPs. And so in terms of that distribution of hit one and apply to all, this is one that is relatively dangerous. And now being able to have direct control over embedded firmware makes it even more persistent, and keeping that veil over them in this proxy network even more difficult to unravel because of that persistence capability at the firmware level.
Yeah. So if we take a look at this particular one here, I just drilled into one of them, and if I highlight over here, you'll see, hey, it's this Netgear. We've already identified what type it is, and we're looking at the response. You know, say, hey, you're not authorized. You're not. So the big thing that I thought of was, I said, okay, if you're attacking these things, and I have this JSON file. Okay, so let me grab that JSON. So I had this JSON file, and I said, hey, I can grab these IP addresses that are listed. So if you look right here, here's the value of these. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So I have these IP addresses, but it's going to be kind of hard for me. I have to go in and run some grep and pull it out and clean it up to get a list to be able to throw it in. So I talked to Mark and I go, hey, we're seeing more and more JSON file outputs that people are publishing. Do we have a script that can just suck this into a Jupyter notebook? And what I want to do is I want to look at the components, what components are there, and see, hey, was there something common across all of these components that maybe why they got compromised, or a service that maybe was running that allowed them, the threat actor, to get in? And he goes, that's a really cool idea. Let's do it. So what we did was we took this. So I'm gonna clean this out so it's all empty, and then we'll run it. So what we're doing is we're going to import this JSON file, and we're going to pull out the values of them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this real quick. Okay, so cell run all, and it'll take about 2-3 minutes to run. So it loads up this IP address that it pulled out of the JSON. You saw it came really quick. So what's really cool is that you can take this script now and use the API to pull out indicators from the JSON that you can now instantly say, hey, I want the reputation for these, or give me more information about the certificates, or about the components, or any aspect that you want. And so what it's doing right now, it's going to go through and run reputation on all of those indicators. And you can see right here, these are all the indicators that were listed. And this is going to take just a minute or so. And once it finishes, I'm going to get the reputation, the components. And then I have another one that just ran the components. So when you look at the reputation for these, it's going to show that these are bad because all of these were in the article potentially, or flagged as bad in the system because they were part of ATP 31's infrastructure. But then as they get cleaned up, the reputation will get better. But I wanted to look at the component piece, and that's towards the bottom. So this will take another minute or so. So this is live. So this is, how long it would take you to do this full investigation. But the cool thing is, if I have a different JSON file, I can take that and use it to bring in those indicators, and then change what aspect I'm looking at, and reuse the script many, many, many times. I don't have to be a programmer for this. Once I have a template, I can reuse this template. So this will take another 15-20 seconds. Yeah. Any questions coming in?
Yep, just answering one question about web components.
Yeah. So web components is like when we go to the web, the domain, and we look at what's installed and running, we might see like frameworks. We might look at different types of infrastructure that is installed and running. We even have products that will go down to down to like the JavaScript and verify that the JavaScript isn't malicious. So we can even get down to that level. Yeah. Okay. So we're starting to get the data in. So now it's done. Okay. So if I expand this out, you'll see, hey, this has been tagged as malicious within your organization. And here's the IP address. But what I want to look at is the components. So when I look at these components, and as I started to go through, I saw something that was pretty cool. So let me Command F. Okay. So as I go through, I started to see that there was a lot of universal plug and play turned on, because when people were at home and they want to do their gaming, they wanted to automatically create the firewall rules and to set up everything. So most of these had universal plug and play enabled. So I suspect that that played a big part on how these people were compromised, because it was on all of these, or most of them, that's what was turned on. So it was a way for me to quickly go through and start looking at these things. I didn't filter it down to say, add them in as like when I get more than X number, but that would be the next thing in the script, is to go through and start counting these and say, rank them by the number of times that they're seen. So I can look very quickly and say, these are the common things across all of these indicators. And that's probably what happened and how they got compromised. But I suspect it's through universal plug and play that was enabled on these routers and caused the issue through the problem in the firmware. Any questions?
People here really genuinely like the old Jupyter notebook.
They're awesome.
Every time we have some other new way to twist it and utilize it, it's pretty. I like it. I like the versatility and the speed that you can kind of scale out. Joe, are you seeing in our customers where you're deploying out there? I mean, they don't let us out. Benjamin and I, we just sit inside the Zoom meeting every day, and they don't let us out all that often. So we're engaged in this way. But Joe actually gets to go out there into the wild. Are you seeing Jupyter getting used in those practical ways out there?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of my customers are starting to use, well, not a lot of them aren't starting to use Jupyter, but are starting to, recognize that we are greatly building up our library of ready to go tools within those notebooks and sharing them out. So definitely been a lot of work with our integrations team lately and sort of disseminating some of the already built playbooks in there and some of the different use cases for using the passive total wrapper. Which, in case anybody's looking for it, it's up on PyPy. Read the docs, is a full document manual on it. So very easy to get started with the analyzer.
Yeah. So yeah. So when you think about everything that we showed you today, this is where it's like a targeted attack or something that was sent to you, a place that you went to. But now we're going to talk about like Josh always said, the person that goes to the bank pulls out $300 and is counting it as they're walking to their car, and the bad person sees the person with the counting his money and goes, oh, I'm going to go rob that person, they have some cash. So these are the common attacks that vectors that we see people leveraging. And so, like, for example, some of these attacks that we showed today we're leveraging, like Windows Remote Desktop. Others are VNC, FTP, SSH, Telnet, your VoIP servers, NFS, your Synology at your small business where you have all of your files stored there, Nginx. So what I want to be able to do is to give you these links that you can go out and search and find the millions of devices that are out there that are running these protocols. So like if you're running Windows Remote Desktop, it shouldn't be directly accessible on the internet, because somebody can go in there and find passwords on the deep and dark web for your organization, try those to log in and potentially get in, or brute force attack to get in. So Josh, do you have anything to talk about on this? And I'll get those loaded up.
Well, one of the things is just like we send these signals out. And you mentioned like the one I use all the time of, I say signal in that sort of like conceptual way. What kind of signs are we putting out there? What kind of signals are we giving to folks? And oftentimes we're unaware of it. And so being able to know what different services are running, what ports are open, and which protocols that we're exposing to the internet. Again, we've just now started living in the internet. The adversary has been out there all along. We're the new neighbors in town. And again, when it comes to this behavioral shift that we're seeing, on that continuum, on that spectrum of highly targeted attacks from highly skilled, sophisticated threat actors with a boatload of funding from things like nation states, okay? There's that idea, and that's sort of been lodged in our head and lodged in our memories for so long that it can be difficult to pivot. Not to use a pivot pun here, but it can be difficult to pivot to a concept that says, actually, there are these global scale attacks that are driven by opportunism, because there's a recognition among the threat community that everybody's digital now and everybody's connected to everybody else. And sometimes we are late to that game in realizing that. And what they're doing, again, one of the two biggest things that happened this year was Microsoft Exchange, right? And Sunburst with Orion, SolarWinds, right? And both are global scale attacks that are opportunistic in nature, where scan, find, then attack. Then figure out if it's something inside that place that you want. But first, get it done, get the toehold. And that sort of opportunism is more like a mugging, like you were saying. It's not necessarily stalking you for months and figuring out where you walk around, where you go or anything, but seeing everyone as common. Okay, anybody that walks away from that ATM and anyone who's not looking over their shoulder and just sitting there counting their cash is someone I can take advantage of. It's not personal anymore.
Right.
Okay.
It's a script. It's a script that runs. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not personal. It's not targeted at you. But you're the one. If you're hit, it is personal to you because you're not intending for that to happen. But it's this change of perspective where we have to think about it not nearly as much as because a lot of organizations think like that. I work at Caterpillar. We build heavy machinery. Nobody's targeting me. Yeah, right. You think so. You might think that. You're not a bank. You're not a giant retailer. Sure, that logic worked 5-10 years ago. It just doesn't anymore. Now that we've all digitized ourselves, and again, the first problem that we all face, right? Digital ate the world. Now that that's reality, we have to worry about this interconnectivity that gives rise to this opportunism. And then when you inject inside of there, in the form of ransomware, for example, that there's an underground economy and a capability to earn, spending power via ransom. I don't care who I'm hitting anymore, because no matter who it is, they're going to care about their resources, data, and stuff more than me. I just want to rip some cryptocurrency out of them. And so that lends itself, again, not to a more personal attack that's targeted at you, but to where you're the victim of circumstance. And what we can do all together is we can reduce those circumstances by looking at these open windows. Sorry, I know you're trying to get into showing these services and so forth, but that's just a way to think about it. Like we can reduce the probability of attack when we reduce the circumstances and not be a victim of those circumstances that signal to an attacker, come and get me. So sorry, you were going to RDP though, right?
Yeah, so what I want to talk about is that the common attack vectors that people are doing these opportunistic attacks or attacking people because they have bad hygiene on the internet. For example, the remote desktop gateways and Windows remote desktop, okay? So once you get on the machine, you're on the machine. You have the access that you logged into that machine with. If that machine had privileged access to talk to other things laterally, you now have that access. One of the other ones were like VNC. And here's all the different versions of VNC that are running out there. So if there's a vulnerability that's in that VNC that's out there, you could leverage it and get in, or brute force to get in. One of them that I brought up were building control systems. So I just did one for building control, and I took an IP and I said, hey, can I access it? Yep, I have a login prompt to get in. If I have a building control system, do I want it exposed on the internet? Absolutely not. If you look at Target, they were compromised through a building control system that was internal, that somebody got into that company's system, and then from there got into all the targets, did all that POS stuff, attacks. So this is where we are. And if you don't have good hygiene, it's your fault. And you need to know about your attack surface, what you have, what's there, how it looks like, why it's important. And Josh, I want to see if do you think we have enough time for me to quickly go in and show the vuln intel to show what's coming?
Let's do those two things. Let's show the vulnerability intelligence, which is pretty cool. Because so when you take vulnerabilities, which we all can find, right? And they're enumerated. I think this year we're going to bust through the 20,000 number, which is just a little bit depressing. But last year we went over 18,000 CVEs that were identified and enumerated. This year we're on pace to do around 21,000, which is just astonishing. But what we did, because we're looking at all this infrastructure activity and threat actor tracking and such, what we did was we paired it up with actual exploitation information. So that way you can see, like, okay, here are the vulnerabilities that I have, and here are the top areas of concern. What's actually getting exploited out there? But then also you can say, what are the vulnerabilities my third parties have? And are any of those actually getting exploited right now? Oh my goodness, it just makes it so much quicker.
So let me
what you should care about.
So let me show you real quick what's happening. So there's thousands of CVEs out there, but if you think about that, which ones do I have? And then which ones are actively being exploited right now? And the ones that are actively being exploited right now that I have, those are the top ones I need to focus on. And so once you identify that, you can also look at the third party. So in my third party view, I have 41 different organizations listed, okay? But in the lab, there's 10 that are listed. Now, I'm going to look at this new section. So if you're if you currently have Illuminate, you're a current customer of ours with that paid version, you have it today. On Monday, it's going in for anybody that's in the trial. So if I look at these vulnerabilities, I can quickly see which CVEs I have. So I'm going to pick one. I have a camera in my way, so I'm going to click.
I got to tell you too, look, before we end, we do need to show people how to get a trial. Because seriously, and I mean, this is just sort of public address announcement here, okay? Public service announcement. Look, if all you do is get it on Monday, a vulnerability intelligence is just baked in, okay? Right. It's not an extra fee. It's not an extra anything, not an extra module, license, users, or anything like that. You just get it, okay? So go ahead and get it. And in 30 days time, you're going to find so many of these that are these already being exploited in your attack surface, identifiable. And you know what? If after 30 days, you don't really care to keep Illuminate around, fine, we'll shake hands. You're still a part of the community. Let's still be friends, okay? But at least go and handle this stuff. There's going to be over 20,000 vulnerabilities this year. About 10% of those have active exploits, and that's a trend line we keep seeing. So if there's 15,000 vulnerabilities in a given year, like it was in 2014, okay, about 1,500 are being exploited. Now fast forward, 21,000 or so. Again, the rolling average is around 10% are actively exploited. Now it's 2,100 different vulnerabilities being exploited. And guess what? My attack surface since 2015 has more than quintupled, right? So it's everywhere. It's all out there. We just talked about that all day long today. Okay, so just go get the trial, use it, and then if after some time and getting all these things buttoned down and everything, just okay, fine, we move on. But just get it so that way you can at least not get flanked in these opportunistic ways.
So this view right here, you can search for any CVE. So, but these are CVEs that are in my environment. So we give you the description. We show you all the references about them, all of the affected components, okay, where those are. We even go to the deep and dark web and look for those CVEs. So you can have all that information to see what's the chatter that's happening. But the other thing that we do is if we see active exploits, we'll show you, hey, there's been one known exploit and this is where it is. And this is where I can find it. So it talks about it. So we give you those links to see it, okay? And it's all in one place. And we even give you the CWEs. And the CWE is the common weakness enumeration. So that's even another way to look at it and see how easy is it to be exploited, and is there attacks happening currently in the environment, in the world that are happening. So then that will be give you a score of how critical this is for you to really take action, so you can focus. So think of it that all of these things that we're doing is giving you a lens to say, I want to see all the problems in the world. I want to see the problems that I have. I want to see where I should focus my priorities to fix them. But then once you do that, the next step is you say, I have third parties that I rely upon. My business relies upon my payment card processor or somebody else. I can easily go through and say, look for the CVE across all of my third parties that I'm monitoring, and immediately see and say, oh, I can click on this one and see where they are in those environments. So you can pick up the phone and say, hey, there's a critical vulnerability. There's an active exploit in the wild. What's your plan to fix these? We do a lot of business with you. We can't be down. When are you going to fix it? And when they do, it disappears because we see that it's no longer vulnerable because it's been patched. There's a new version. So that's the piece that no one else has, is the ability to know active exploits, all the information in one place. Look for any CVE. Is it in my environment, or is it in a third party that I'm monitoring? Global view, your local view, and your expanded view of your associates that you're doing business with.
Yeah. So that's the new vulnerability intelligence capability. Again, we've been tracking vulnerabilities forever. But what we did was we paired it all up. That's the kind of latest development trick. The magic trick that we're doing is pair it up with the threat intelligence we're seeing. So we have this threat intelligence and threat observations, pair that up with vulnerability information, and you get vulnerability intelligence with active exploits, as well as the remediation strategies. Again, now last time, Benjamin, we had the learn more link.
Yes.
I think we had a misspelling.
Yes, I copied and pasted this one in here.
Okay.
So there won't be any issue. That's
right,
why
you just click on that link. There's a big orange button right there. The lab environment in about 10 minutes is going to get burned down. You can click on that link and just keep the fun going. And then again, if after 30 days you've seen what you've seen and you're good, hey, that's cool. You're still a part of the community. We're still all friends together. We're still in this fight together. We all want to make the internet a safer place, because that's where we live now. We live on the internet. Right now, we're doing work together on the internet, through the internet. And so we want all of us want the same result, and that's a safer internet. So do the trial, get rid of some of these vulnerabilities, find where they are. And then, I promise you'll enjoy yourself, because it makes it a lot easier to do. And then after 30 days, if that's the whole kit and caboodle, no worries. And we'll still be working together in these workshops in the future. We're really glad that you were able to be here today and get a glimpse of what it's like to look at adversary infrastructure, those loaded guns that are just draped all around the internet. Right. And anyone can pick them up and fire that gun at you. And so we also took a look at some of the common ways that we may inadvertently be signaling to threat actors that we're an easy mark, not through any fault of our own necessarily, but just the circumstances we live in now that we took to living a digital life. And so Benjamin, any parting comments, or Joe, anything else that we want to say before we wrap up the workshop today?
So please let us know if you like these workshops. We'll have this up on YouTube probably in the next 24 hours. And let us know if there's any topics you'd like us to cover or show. These are interactive. You ask questions, we go through them, and some of the suggestions from the audience are become the use cases for future workshops.
And the certificates, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's right.
Certificates.
No, I didn't. So everyone that attends gets 2 CPE credits. You'll be getting Credly badges. So we're going to be sending out links to Credly. And then from there, when you log in and you associate it with yourself, it'll be an easy way for you to track your CPEs over time. We do these workshops like twice a month. So you can earn, a bunch of CPE credits for your continuing education. Joe, any parting words?
No, thank you all for joining today. If you have any questions, you can reach out to any of us, including myself. Be happy to work with you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Hey, thank you.